Welcome to the Sacred Nurse podcast, broadcasting from WinCam in Winchester, Mass. I'm Michelle Moscone, a retired registered nurse with a lifelong devotion to caring for others. Yet it wasn't until I embarked on my own healing journey that I truly discovered the sacred path of whole person care. The first half of my career unfolded in the medical ICU of a major Boston hospital where I stood daily at the crossroads of life, death, and crisis. But over time, the cost of that disconnection became deeply personal. After years of unprocessed trauma and environmental exposure, my body began to shut down. At the time, it felt like a collapse, but in hindsight, it was a sacred threshold, a doorway into transformation. The traditional nursing role no longer served me, but something deeper within me stirred awake. I began exploring a different model of healing, one rooted in energy, emotion, presence, and spiritual awareness, emerging with a renewed understanding of what it truly means to heal. My journey echoed the myth of Pluto and Persephone. Like Persephone, I descended into darkness and returned with wisdom. I reclaimed my voice, my path, and my soul. This podcast is a safe space for those stories. Each episode is a conversation with someone who has walked through their own underworld and emerged transformed. Like Persephone, you are not just a survivor, you are your own queen. Welcome to Pluto Pathology, where healing begins in the depths. For more information, go to my website, sacrednurse.com. Hi, I'm Michelle Moscone. Welcome to the Sacred Nurse podcast, From Wounds to Wisdom. Today I have, my guest is Nicole Henley. We met a couple of years ago. We both took a Reiki 3, Usui Holy Fire Reiki 3 Master class together. It was a weekend program, and that's where we met. And today she's agreed to be my guest and talk about her wound. So thank you, Nicole, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so
the wound.
wound.
So it was interesting when I was speaking to Michelle about the podcast, and she was like, just talk about like the wound that made you realize that you needed to, and there's so many. There are so many wounds, and so I'm a integrative somatic trauma therapist. I'm an energy practitioner. I'm a quote-unquote soul alchemist is what I like to call it. I've been studying esoteric and occult practices since high school. I've been a Reiki master teacher for 12 and a half years now. I'm orthopedic massage therapist for 17 years. I read tarot, do mediumship work, shamanic practice, plant medicine, all kinds of work. And it wasn't until I started doing the integrative somatic trauma therapy work, which I actually learned through Peter Levine, who's the man who put somatic experiencing on the map, that I really started understanding myself the best. So, you start doing trauma work and you think especially as an energy practitioner, right? Or especially as someone who helps other people, you think that you've been doing like the hard work for a really, really long time, And for me, I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing the shadow work and I'm doing the inner child work and I'm doing this hard work. And it wasn't until I started doing the trauma work that I realized that I had just been spending like 15 and a half years doing soft work in preparation for the hard work. About 7 years ago, I started working with my trauma therapist, and the first thing she asked me to do was to relax my body. And it was a very simple thing. Just sit and relax your body, soften your chest. I was fine with that. Soften your belly. I was fine with that. She said, soften your pelvic floor. And I didn't have the ability to. And so my brain, trying to conceptualize that, was really just like, oh, well, I've had 2 children. I had 2 natural childbirths. They were pretty easy, but, like pelvic floor stuff after children, didn't really think much of it. And then the more we went through the trauma work and the attachment styles and wounding, I started thinking a lot about abandonment wounding and how that shows up in my life within professional and personal relationships. And inner child wounding, and it brought me all the way back to the fact that I'm an adopted child. And not only am I an adopted child, but I was removed from the home. I was not given up for adoption. And I was removed from the home at around 2.5. And when you're that young, you don't have cognitive memory of anything that kind of happened. So the thing with trauma, and we all know, like, the body keeps score. There's the book ever, these are all buzzy terminologies. But what we don't realize is that there's a part of our brain that stores non-cognitive trauma. And it's that monkey part of our brain that still believes that there's a saber-toothed tiger outside the cave. And there's no saber-toothed tiger outside the cave, obviously, but that part of our brain still wants us to think that we are unsafe. And so, yeah, the body keeps score, but so does the brain. And when you don't have a cognitive memory or cognitive memories of why, you're literally walking through life with a trauma lens on that you don't even realize you have. And so my real first wound came from the fact that I was adopted, and not even the fact that I was adopted, because my adoption story is a really beautiful story, but it's the life that I lived previous to being adopted. And this is not something that I've talked about outside of my family much. So I don't know how much I'll actually share, but
whatever you're comfortable.
So the only information that I actually have about this story comes from my mom, my adopted mom, who worked through the agency that I was adopted through. English was not my first language. Portuguese was my first language. And when I was removed and put into the system, my mom, my adopted mom, she used to train people to be foster parents. That was her job. And she was also a Portuguese speaker. And so they called her and they said, we have this little girl here who speaks Portuguese. Well, actually, they called my dad because he was at home. My mom was at her other job. They said, we have this little girl here who speaks Portuguese, and Maria's the only person that we know who can communicate with her. And so I came to be with my family through that, like very interesting, like serendipitous moments. And interestingly enough, my mom is kind of what triggered all of that other stuff in the end as well, that brought me to this space. But so that part of my adoption story is really, really, really beautiful. But I only have accounts from what she knew, and then from my adoption file. And, I remember being little, and every time I would go to take a shower, which was like every day, I would scream hysterically. My brothers and my sister have like vivid memories of just like hiding in their beds, like with pillows over their heads, because I was screaming in the shower because I didn't want to be in there. And it was because my mom, my birth mom, she was incredibly mentally ill. And there was a day that she couldn't really like take it anymore. And so she put me in a bathtub and turned the water on, plugged the hole, and left the house. And so I was found like an hour and a half later, and it's, the whole like babies know how to float. They have that float instinct. I was found like in a full bathtub, overflowing, with my head up, floating.
Nicole. Oh.
And so there's that part of it. And then I used to get chronic yeast infections when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old. And I didn't know why. And my mom never really told me why. And it wasn't until much later that we found out that my dad, my biological father, he used to sexually abuse me as a baby. And so I remember being in therapy very early on, and the therapist telling my mom that it would be really important for her to watch out for me going through a lot of firsts. So like first sexual experiences and like first childbirth, things like that, because my natural instinct would be to dissociate from those situations. And it was interesting because growing up, I was like, I was a very impulsive teenager. I did a lot of like impulsive, risky things as a teenager. And, we just chalked it up to like
being a teenager,
being an impulsive teenager, when really it was because I had a lot of these things in me that I just didn't.
Did you ever have dissociative episodes?
I had lots of dissociative episodes. Yeah. Like thinking about, if I think back to like the fact that like all of my intimate experiences, I had to be under the influence of something. And I'm a sober human. It'll be 6.5 years, or it'll be 6 years in February.
Congratulations.
Which is wonderful, and that was by choice. It wasn't because I like thought that I had a problem. It was just through this part of my healing journey. I was like, this doesn't work for me anymore, and I'm going to see how long I can take it. And it's been almost 6 years. But there were lots of moments that I would dissociate from life. And, people think that dissociation is this like really big thing, but how many times have you like in your life just like come to at some point in the day and been like, where was I?
Driving the car.
Right.
Where was it's I? Like, how did I get here?
Yeah. So fast forward, right? I'm, I have my son at 26. I have my daughter at 32, and I'm, well into my massage practice. I'm well into like my energy work practice. And then my mom gets sick in 2019 and she passes in 2019. So she gets sick in 28. She had been sick for 17 years. She battled cancer for 17 years, 4 different metastases. But in 2018, she got very sick, and it was kind of the end. And a year before that, I had started doing, so it is almost 10 years now that I have been doing my integrative somatic trauma work with my coach. And so I'm working through all of this trauma work as my mom is working through the end of her life. And it was at that point where I completely emotionally shut down. And I figured, my brain logically was like, you need to emotionally shut down now so that you can make it through. Like, I don't know how much like about, and I mean, we were just talking about hospice stuff, right?
Yes,
so like,
it was the hospice. Yeah.
Right. Families at end of life, right? They're all trying and coming from like very emotional places. And I'm the youngest of 4, only adopted one. My entire family is out there just like, we need to keep her alive, we need to keep her alive. And my brain was like, you need to emotionally shut down so that you can make these like, you can help make these like very logical decisions. So I shut myself down emotionally. I ended up being the person that transitioned my mom. I was also, when we decided to put her on hospice, I was the only one that the hospice nurses like actually directly spoke to, because they knew that I was the only one that was making logical decisions. But I was also drinking a lot. And in that period of time, I also I had been going through postpartum depression with my daughter completely unchecked. I was not very nice to her dad. My trauma and my abandonment wound and my self-worth wound and all of those wounds kind of like came and culminated to a head after or during my mom's like hospice time and after she passed away, to the point where my trauma, and I won't even I don't know if I've even taken accountability for this to him, to his face yet, actually, but the majority of my trauma and the fact that I didn't deal with it at all is kind of what ended my relationship with my daughter's father. You walk through life acting in certain ways and being a certain way and not understanding that it really is because you have such deep wounds. And
right. So I'm curious. So when you, you have your trauma, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. So when you were a teenager, when did you realize that your behaviors weren't working for you anymore?
As a teenager, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't realize.
When did you get it? That something's wrong. I have to figure this out.
I was probably in my 20s.
Okay.
Right. So as a teenager, I was very impulsive. I was wild. Then I went to Berklee College of Music, spent a year and a half at Berklee College of Music. But if you want to talk about being impulsive, right? I met this person. I had left Berklee, but I was still kind of hanging out there. I was 21. And I met this random Rastafarian hippie from the West Coast. You want to talk about dude had a beaver tail dread, used to brush his teeth with apples.
Oh God.
You know, that kind of hippie of a person. And he was listen, you should go to the West Coast. And this was a very platonic situation, but he was go to the West Coast. And I was okay.
With him?
No, he was go to the West Coast. And I was okay. 2 days later, I cleared my bank account and I got on a Greyhound bus and I went to the West Coast. Didn't know anyone there. I had no idea where I was going. I ended up in a place called Willits, California. Willits, California is a tiny, like, podunk town in southern Humboldt County. This was back when, like, cannabis was just legal out there, and it was just freshly legal out there. It was, like, the growing season, so it was the trimming season. Everyone was, like, getting jobs doing that out there, so I did that. But then I decided I was going to hitchhike. So I hitchhiked the entirety of the West Coast. Then I hitchhiked from the West Coast to the East Coast. And then I decided I was going
to... And nothing happened to you? You were safe?
I was safe the entire time because divinely guided and protected,
yes,
right?
You have...
I know that over, like, the course of my life, and I look back on these moments, and there are lots of times where I could have been in these very, like, situations, and something plucks me out every single time. But then I decided I'm going to go, like, follow the remaining members of the Grateful Dead. So I did that. Let me tell you, like, I didn't wear shoes. I had dreadlocks. I turned into, like, one of those. Yeah. Still, those are core memories and of what they're what shaped me into who I am today. But I was the moment, and it's interesting. I tell this story pretty frequently. The moment was I had eaten a lot of psychedelics. I was on the beach in Oregon. I was 24 years old, and I'm having a screaming conversation with the universe, and
by yourself on the beach?
By myself on the beach, crying, screaming to the universe that I needed an anchor, because I was so scared at that point that if I didn't have something to anchor me down in life, that I was going to either be in jail or dead. Fast forward 6 months later, I find out I'm pregnant with my son. I was never having kids. Ever. It was not my plan. I was a tumbleweed. I was too selfish.
Yeah.
You know, and I said that. I would say that out loud. I'm never having kids. I'm too selfish. And I'm very much like a pro-choice human being, right? Like, you do you. Anything you want to do, like, that's for you. It's your body. You make that decision. But the minute that I found out that I was pregnant with my son, I remember looking at the sky and being like, I see you. And there was no choice for me in that moment. I was like, this is my anchor. And he was my anchor. And it's funny, like, this has nothing to do with trauma, but I literally said that I was never having kids again after that. But then I made the mistake of saying but. And I said, but if I do, I have to have one more and only one more. And it has to be by the time I'm 32. And let me tell you, I had my daughter at 32 years old.
Wow.
You know, so it's one of those careful words have power.
Yes.
Like, not even careful what you wish for, but words have power. And, like, when you are an intentional person, you know, the universe will test those intentions. If you know, they're like, you're talking the talk, will you actually walk the walk?
Exactly.
You know, and so they give you these tests to learn to walk the walk. But that was really, I think, for me, if I think about it deep enough, that was the moment that I knew that I had to, like, figure it out. Because I had to stop being the person that I was.
Now you're responsible for two other people. You know, they depend on you.
Sure. But with my son, you know, especially, there are lots of people out there still living the lifestyle of following the remaining members of the Grateful Dead or any kind of, like, jam band, which I love. I love that culture. I'm still a very big part of that community.
You're a musician too.
I'm a musician, but, like, I'm part of that community very much so. But I have seen women not leave that lifestyle fully. You know, they're still out there, like, touring with their children, or leaving their children to go on tour, you know, leaving their children with their parents, still continuing to drink heavily during pregnancy, or, you know, take drugs during pregnancy. And for me, like, I had this conversation with the universe. I said, I need an anchor. The universe gave me the anchor. And so I was going to do everything in my power to prove that, like...
Now, did you read anything? Like, did you study anything? Like, how did you... Because it's one thing to say, I have to change, but what helped you?
Well, it was everything that I had read and studied early on. Like, so I was a teenager in the 90s, right? Back in the 90s, you know, the movie, like, The Craft came out.
Yeah.
Right? I was 12 years old when that movie came out. So you can imagine 12-year-old me. I mean, you've seen, I'm wearing bones in my ears right now. 12-year-old me was like, that's who I want to be.
Yeah.
And so and this is back when, like, people went to the library all the time. We didn't have tiny computers at like our fingertips. You had to go and read books, and we didn't have Kindles. We didn't have any of those things. So I was like let me study all of these things. And I mean, if you have 2.5 hours, we can talk about my spiritual journey that started at 9 years old, you know.
There'll be another podcast.
Right. But I've been questioning existence and like been a truth seeker since I was probably 9 years old. And so anything that I could do to study outside of like my Catholic religious upbringing. So I was studying theology, like I was self-studying theology very, very early, Hermeticism, alchemy practices, energy work practices at 13, 14, 15 years old, right? But I wasn't putting any of those things into practice. And it's funny because I had always wanted to be that person.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I'm pregnant with my son, and I'm like, how do I make a living doing the thing? And being an energy work practitioner was not something you could make a living at 17 years ago. He'll be 17. Crazy.
Yeah.
But that wasn't 18, 17, 16, 15. It wasn't really until the last decade that like being an energy work practitioner was a thing that you could even consider making a living at. And if you were someone that was making a living doing that, you were like the crazy old lady in the woods. Right. Which like at 43 now, like I want to be the crazy old lady in the woods for sure. So I ended up becoming a massage therapist because I was like, that will at least get my foot in the door. I was also the person that like people were always like, give me massages, like put your hands on me, like your energy feels really good. And so it wasn't like any one thing in that moment that I read, but it was just like, have you ever had an experience where like everything comes rushing back to you all of a sudden?
Yes.
It was that
Yes.
for me. You know, like I remember being 17 years old and reading Osho's book, Zen: A Path to Paradox, which was the first time that I had read a book where I was like, oh my God, everything that I think in my brain is actually something real that someone has written down in a book that other people are reading.
I had that experience. I think I was 21 and I broke off an engagement. And after, I think we were engaged for like 4 or 5 years. Well, we were together for 4 or 5 years. I met him when I was 18, then I went to nursing school. And then once I graduated, I realized what a control freak he was. And, you know, he wanted me to obey him, do what he said. He had to meet all my friends and approve of them. And I just had this whoosh. I'm like, I can't marry this guy. So I broke it off, and I found a book, Zen, and by Alan Watts.
Okay.
And
I love Alan Watts.
Read that. I still have it. I reread it, and I underline with different colors, and and that made sense to me. It was like that book was talking to me. Yeah. So I know exactly where you're coming from.
And so then, you know, I think the next kind of moment, because, you know, we have these evolutions in our healing, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, I'm healed. Like, no one is healed.
Yeah.
We just have evolutions in our healing.
Right.
And, you know, there's also the, like, you know, step in and be your authentic self. Like, we're always like, once you kind of get on that journey, you're always some iteration of your authentic self. I was authentic a year ago, but I'm not the same person that I was a year ago, right? So I'm just, we're constantly stepping into our most authentic selves.
Right.
We're constantly on this like evolution of healing. And so the next step in my evolution of healing after my son, and that was my mom passing away, and my daughter's father like deciding that he wanted to break up, so we broke off our engagement. I quit drinking, and I started doing like very, very deep, like integrative trauma work, because yes, I was doing this work and I was understanding my trauma and I was trying to like embody that person, but like I also wasn't actually integrating any of the stuff, so I was still getting activated by people, right? People who you can conceptualize the work, you can conceptualize the fact that you have the trauma, you can even like be embodied in it, but it's not until you're hit with it in the wild that you really know whether or not like you've worked through it, right? People talk about trauma is not the thing that happened to you, it's how your body responds to it. People talk about wanting to release their trauma or heal their trauma. Like, I firmly believe that we don't release our trauma and we don't heal our trauma. We embody ourselves, and it's not like releasing the trauma because it's always going to be there. You're always going to get activated. Something is always going to trigger you or activate you. You know, like before we started, like I was talking to you about my driving, right? And I got into a car accident. Someone cut me off on the left-hand side of the road, and it took me 16 years And like, this is why I know that integrative somatic trauma therapies work, because I drove after 16 years of complex PTSD, right?
Yeah.
But people still cut me off on the left-hand side of the road, right? Like,
But you
I'm
don't.
still, and my body still gets activated,
Yeah.
but I don't lose control.
Right.
And that's what
That's
it
the
is.
key. It is.
It's the not losing the control.
Right.
It's the understanding that you're having the sympathetic nervous response.
Mm-hmm.
It's the allowing yourself to be in that moment and like handle it in the microsecond of the moment while still moving on with your life. I always talk to clients about how it's like having your Neo in the Matrix moment, right? So when he realizes that he can stop the bullets,
Yeah.
the bullets
Yeah.
are flying at him, and it's like, oh my God, I'm going to hit by these bullets, and then he stops the bullets. He stops time. He practices the pause. You know, you hear people talking about practicing the pause. How do you practice the pause, right? Like, I can't do it. I don't have enough time. You can. You can practice the pause, but you have to you have to do the work to be inside your body, consciously present, in order to really be able to like have those matrix moments where the trigger happens, you get activated, and you stop it
Right.
without suppressing it.
Right. It's like making peace with your demons.
Right.
You know, I've suggested people, like, you know, they come in, you know, thoughts come in. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
It's just a thought floating by. Say hello to it.
Yeah.
Make peace with it. You know, give it a snack and put it away.
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
It's just
It's
a
what
thought.
it is.
It just comes in and it goes out.
Right. So to piggyback off that, right? Like, it doesn't even need to become a thought, right? Most triggers or activations, I really kind of hate using the word trigger because it's gotten so buzzy.
Yeah.
But your nervous system gets activated and it's a physical response, right? If we allow ourselves to feel the physical response, to fully feel it, 90 seconds, 120 max, it never actually becomes a thought manifestation at all. We don't even need to think about it. It's just like, oh, my body, it's
Feel it.
right. We just need to feel it.
Right.
Right? Like, someone cuts me off. I actually drive in the left lane on the highway all the time now, probably so I don't get cut off. But, you know, sometimes someone cuts me off from the left-hand side, my body gets activated.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, here we go. And you just ride out that very uncomfortable physical feeling. So now, with the work that I do now, a lot of what I do is still, you know, very esoteric based. You know, I still work people through the 7 operations of alchemy. I still read their tarot. I still put them on the table. We still do soul retrievals and past life regressions and Reiki and shamanic work. But then there's a full after, because again, we were talking about this beforehand. You can do you as a practitioner can do all of the work, but if a person is not integrating that work on a physical level, you know, I will write up full reports for people afterwards that include journal prompts, but they also include somatic exercising, like orienting and trigger tracking and all of these things that you can then put into practice in the wild, so that eventually you do become this embodied being that can handle the bullets that are flying at you, you know?
I love that. Yes.
So, and again, so many people are like, I want to release my trauma. And I have had conversations with people where I'm like, okay, but that's like you want to release a tiger from the zoo, right? What do you do with the tiger when you let it out of the zoo? Are you a tiger tamer? Do you know how to talk to the tiger once it's out of the zoo? Or are you just going to roar on people? Because the trauma happened. We can't change that. It's never going to go anywhere. The body is always going to have a nervous system response. It's how quickly we deal with it, and how much you can learn, how many tools you can put in your toolbox to fully be able to embody that and take accountability for the fact that you're being triggered. There are times now in personal relationships where I'm having an argument with someone and, you know, something comes up and I'm like, okay, I know this isn't you. But it's making me feel this way because XYZ.
Right.
So
how does the work you do now help your clients? What feedback have you gotten from your clients with the work you do with them?
I mean, I have a client that literally has told me that she would not be alive if it were not for the work that we do. When I met her, it was 3 years ago. This woman has been seeing me weekly for 2 hours for 3 years. She drives from Amesbury, Massachusetts to Quincy to come see me. And I will not divulge her traumatic story because I can't, but has dealt with a lot of trauma since very, very, very early on. But things like going out in public for long periods of time, having social interactions with people, like those things were not things that she was even comfortable seeing. I will, and she will allow me to tell this story. Like, she had so much practitioner abuse before me. She randomly Googled like somatic work and found me.
What do you mean practitioner abuse?
So she had seen therapists before me, energy work practitioners, lots of people who she wasn't progressing fast enough for them. And so they left her. They would leave her. And so she was so scared that I was going to leave her, that for the first 3.5, 4 months of our time together, she would get on my table and pretend to have demonic possessions. And I would just stop, and I would take my hands off of her, and I'd be like, listen, you need to stop. Because, like, I know what, like, that stuff looks like.
Yeah.
And you're not having one. And she would stop, or I would, I have my gong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I would take my gong mallet, and I would just hit the gong really loud.
Yeah.
I'd be like, cut the shit.
Yeah.
Like, and it's beautiful because not only, has she been a very loyal client of mine who literally attributes her life to me. Like, she used to have suicidal ideation frequently. She had eating disorders, like all kinds of stuff. But she, and is a very, like, dear client of mine. But over these last 3 years, she's also become, like, a friend and has known how to reciprocate friendship because she has learned that love exists unconditionally.
Right.
Well,
you do such excellent work.
I mean, I love the work that I do, and it varies on all levels. Like, people will come to me for tarot readings and be like, oh my God, like, a year later, they'll be like, so let me tell you about what happened, right? Like, or energy work where I had a client who didn't realize that energy like Reiki could just be for physical ailment, and so he comes to see me very specifically to, like, work through physical ailment. Massage clients that I've worked on for years that, like, I keep them from hurting themselves during marathons. There's varying levels to the work that I do, and I love all of it. But I think that one client who is literally like, I attribute my life to you, and I have to look at her and I'm like, but you're the one who's doing the work. Because in the end, the work that I do for anyone is I provide a safe container for them to come as they are, to feel safe, taking accountability for themselves. I'm not a healer. Like, I don't like the word. We're all healers.
Right.
The only person that I'm healing is me. Right? The only thing that I can do is facilitate someone else in their own healing journey, in their own healing process. I love creating safe spaces. I love creating a sacred container. You can ask any single one of my clients. I will never give them the answers to anything. I love asking questions to get people to think about things. Do I have the answers? Sure do. But am I going to give it to them? No, because if you give a man a fish, right? Or you teach a man to fish.
Right.
You give them the tools. You remind them of what those tools are. You teach them how to use the tools. You don't do the work for them.
Right.
It's like I haven't been able to help my daughter in math since she was in, like, 2nd grade. I make her do the work for herself.
That was my problem.
Yeah.
I know. My girls, poor things. They had to ask their dad for that.
But I think with my clients really specifically, one of the biggest feedback that I get is that I walk beside them. I don't walk in front of them. Because, again, like, I'm just a human being too. And I mean, you've seen me on social media. Like, I'm very open about who I am. I'm very open about my wins and my losses. I'm very open about the difficult things that I work through and get on the other side of, and how I get on the other side of those things. I had someone tell me that I give away too much information for free because I'm like a living embodiment of getting on the other side of things, and like, this is what I do to get on the other side of it. And they're like, people should pay you for that. I'm like, no, people can pay me for a lot of other things, but like, I'm not gonna, like, that's free information.
Right. Some things you have to give away.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
But the reminder that, like, especially as practitioners, like, there are so many people that have an air of, like, you know, they're bigger than.
Right.
And
Right.
that's not the case.
Right.
That's where that whole idea of, oh, if you're fully healed, you can be like this. Like, you're never going to, like, that's
Right.
not
We
how
were
it
talk-
works.
I know. Because there's always going to be something that comes up. So you
Right.
might clear one layer,
Right.
like peel one onion, you know, but something else is going to come up.
Right.
Something else will come up. And there's always work to be done.
Right. There are
on
just
yourself.
evolutions of the healing, you know, and we're just continuing on these evolutions of our healing. So that's my work, and that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that was great.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing everything.
Thank you for
Nicole.
giving me a safe space, right? But one of my clients recently, she asked me, she goes, "Do you have a you?" And I was like, she
Do you
goes,
have a you?
She goes, "Do you have a Nicole?" And I was like, what? What do you even mean? She was like, is there, like, do you have safe spaces in which you can...
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I'm obviously, like, I have practitioners that I go to, but, like, I don't always have safe spaces where I can, like, be vulnerable. You know, so this is a really beautiful thing that you allow
Thank you.
people to have as a safe space to share themselves.
Yes. And thank you. And I know you've helped a lot of people by being here today.
I hope so.
Yes.
That's literally all even one person. If I've
Yes.
helped one person, I've done my job, you know?
I agree. You can have a room of 100 people. If you
Right.
get through to one,
One person, I've done
you're
my
a
job.
success. Right.
So,
Okay, well, Nicole, well, thank you. So that wraps it up for today's session of Sacred Nurse. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Nicole. We'll
Thank
see you next
you.
time. For more information, go to my website, sacrednurse.com.
I'll be with you soon. Oh, everything's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine. Little